Hello. You have joined the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board's, or CSB's, fourth quarter public business meeting. We will now begin this meeting with Steve Owens, the interim executive authority of the CSB.
Well, thank you, Brian, and hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Steve Owens. I'm a member of the Chemical Safety Board, and I'm currently serving as the interim executive authority for the board. A lot has happened since our last public meeting back at the end of April. As many of you know, our former chair, Dr. Catherine Lemos, announced her resignation on June 10th, and she left the agency at the end of the day last Friday, July 22nd. As provided in the board's internal operating procedures, the board named me as the interim executive on a temporary basis, which is essentially me serving as the acting chair of the CSB for the time being. As you also may know, last week, President Biden nominated me to be the chair of the CSB, and I'm grateful to the president for giving me the opportunity to serve in such an important role. Last month in June, the president nominated Catherine Sandoval to be a member of the Chemical Safety Board. Catherine Sandoval is a professor at the Santa Clara University Law School in California, and we are very much looking forward to her joining us on the board. At the moment, her nomination is pending before the Senate, but we're very hopeful that she'll be joining us in the near future. During today's meeting, we will hear presentations from the CSB staff on several matters relating to the agency's investigations, including recommendation status changes adopted by the board this week. And even more important, our report on the agency's investigation of the tragic incident at the Loyalang Box Company in St. Louis, Missouri, that took 4 lives back in April of 2017. It took the CSB far too long to get this report completed, but member Sylvia Johnson and I, as the 2 current board members, were able to approve that report this week, and we're looking forward to the presentation on that for you here today. This is the first investigative report that has been approved by the board this year, and it's the first report issued by the CSB in over 10 months. I have just a couple of other housekeeping matters before I turn the floor over to board member Johnson for her remarks. First, I just want to let everyone know that today we are making public information that the CSB has received in chemical incidents around the country over the last couple of years under the CSB's release reporting rule, which went into effect back in March of 2020. This is part of our effort to increase transparency and information at the CSB, and we believe that the people of this country have a right to know about chemical incidents that occur in their communities. Second, we also intend to begin issuing factual updates again on the CSB's investigations. The CSB had a practice of providing such updates previously, but it was discontinued during the last year or so. We believe that these updates provide important initial information about the CSB's investigations, and member Johnson and I are working with the CSB's career professional staff to get those updates started again. Finally, at the end of today's meeting, we will be providing an opportunity for public comments. In the interest of time, we will ask each of you to please keep your comments to 3 minutes. And please also use the icon on your screen to raise your hand so that you can be recognized. We'll have a timer on the screen, so you'll also be able to keep to the 3-minute time limit, and we appreciate your indulgence with us on that. Now I'd like to turn this over to board member Sylvia Johnson for her remarks. Sylvia.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to start by, first of all, congratulating you on your nomination to be the chair of the Chemical Safety Board. I am excited about our work together. As you said, we are moving in the direction of having a more transparent board and board activity. I would also be remiss if I did not mention that it was exactly a year ago today on July 29th that Steve and I appeared before the Senate Environment and Public Works Subcommittee for our confirmation hearing. And so it's been a long year. It's been an exciting year, and I'm excited about the things that we are going to do here at the Chemical Safety Board. I would also like to recognize the amazing staff of the CSB. We have a lot of work to get done, but I think we're primed and ready to get that work done. And so I would certainly like to acknowledge the amazing staff at the CSB. Steve and I are inheriting a pretty significant backlog at the agency. I think probably the biggest in the history of the agency, but I think I can speak for both of us that we are committed to moving through and getting that backlog addressed. We would ask that you show us grace and patience as we move through, but that commitment is there for us to get this backlog cleared up. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Steve.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. And I echo Sylvia's comments on our commitment to doing everything we can to reduce the backlog reports. We have been working with the career staff at the agency already to identify ways to move those reports forward and clear up that backlog as soon as we can. And we'll hear a little bit about that today with some of the folks who will follow in just a moment. And turning to that, what we're going to hear today, as I said, are presentations from some of our staff who are involved with our investigations and some of the recommendations that have been approved in connection with those investigations. And first, by the order in which we're going to proceed is I'll introduce the Executive Director of our Office of Investigations and Recommendations, Steve Kleiss. He'll give an update. Then he'll turn the program over to Chuck Barbie, who's the Director of our Office of Recommendations, for an update on some of the status changes for recommendations that we approved this week. And then last and certainly not least, we'll hear from Drew Solly, who's an investigator with the agency who's been working on the Loyalang report, and he'll provide us with a presentation on that. So Steve Kleiss, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. The Office of Recommendations has been making some significant progress over the past month in moving our products forward. I would like to begin, though, with an update on our recruitment efforts. We've discussed at several public meetings the agency's efforts to increase our investigative capacity, and I'm pleased to report that we have a list of candidates that we will be interviewing as early as next week to fill 3 vacancies that we have, again, to expand the agency's investigative capacity. We're also fortunate to have the board's support to expand the recommendations group to allow for opportunities for engaging in more outreach and more advocacy opportunities to share our very important safety message with our stakeholder community. And that position, those positions that we will be filling, the career announcement closes on August the 2nd. So we encourage all those individuals that have a background that would enable us to further our agency's mission. We encourage them to apply for that position. We're making significant progress on the recruitment front. With regard to investigations, we will be here later on at this meeting, a presentation on the key findings, conclusions, and outcomes of the CSB's investigation of the Loyalang Box Company investigation. But we do have two other investigations that are scheduled to be completed before the end of this fiscal year, September 30th. That would be the Philadelphia Energy Solutions and the Sunoco Partners Nederland investigation. For the first quarter of fiscal 23, we have scheduled for the Karari eval investigation and the TPC group investigation. So again, we are very encouraged by our path forward to be able to bring to closure some of these investigations, again, to share these very important safety messages with the stakeholder community. The first presentation that we will have from my office staff will be from Director Chuck Barbie, who will discuss some of the key accomplishments from a series of recommendations that were issued by the board in connection with the AB Specialty Silicones investigation and the prior trust investigation. So Director Barbie, if you could begin, please.
Thank you, Executive Director Kleiss. So we'll get right into it as far as the highlighted recommendations go. They come from the gas well blowout and fire at Prior Trust Well 1H-9, which we call Prior Trust. And that is a recommendation that was issued to API. And then we've got 3 recommendations that were issued to AB Specialty Silicones from the chemical reaction, hydrogen release, explosion, and fire at AB Specialty Silicones investigation. And with that, we'll get right into it. We've talked about the prior trust investigation several times, but I'm going to go ahead and give you an incident brief to remind everybody. On January 22nd of 2018, a blowout and rig fire occurred at Prior Trust 0718 gas well number 1H9, located in Pittsburgh County, Oklahoma. The fire resulted in the fatalities of 5 workers. As part of its investigation, the Chemical Safety Board noted that the safety instrumented systems designed to automatically bring the well to a safe state when similar issues arose was not used in the drilling industry. So as a result, the Chemical Safety Board issued a recommendation to the American Petroleum Institute to convene a group of experts and develop a technical bulletin with strategies to implement blowout preventer safety instrumented systems. So let's talk about what API did. Next slide, please. The API did convene that group of experts as we asked. And then in February of 2022, they issued the first edition of API Bulletin 16H, entitled Automated Safety Instrumented Systems for Onshore Blowout Preventer Actuation. Now, what the bulletin included was a review of existing equipment and interfaces with the blowout preventer, or BOP, as well as an overview of components for potential future resource, among other things, or excuse me, future research. So in short, API did exactly what we asked them to do, and as a result, the board voted to change the status to closed acceptable action. Now, the reason that we are highlighting this particular recommendation is we issue a lot of recommendations to API. Majority of those are to revise or modify one of their products, whether it be a recommended practice, standard, or what have you. In this particular case, we asked them to create a new publication. And that's a significant undertaking when they do that. And so we wanted to recognize them with by highlighting this recommendation. So I would say good job, API, and we'll move on to the next one. So with regard to the chemical reaction, hydrogen release, explosion, and fire at AB Specialty Silicones, I will also provide a quick brief on that. On Friday, May 3rd, 2019, an explosion and fire occurred at the AB Specialty Silicones facility in Waukegan, Illinois. It fatally injured 4 workers, destroyed the facility's production building, and caused extensive damage to nearby businesses. The Chemical Safety Board investigated the incident and found that the explosion resulted from the ignition of hydrogen gas that was released during a process upset that occurred while mixing incompatible materials. Now, to address the gaps that we found during the investigation, the Chemical Safety Board issued 3 recommendations to AB Specialty Silicones. The first was to develop gas detection alarm programs and procedures. The second was to establish a safety management system that addresses process safety. And we wanted to use guidance that included publications from the Center for Chemical Process Safety. One of those was guidelines for risk-based process safety, and the other is guidelines for implementing process safety management. The third recommendation we issued was to incorporate the Center for Chemical Process Safety's publication, Essential Practices for Managing Chemical Reactivity Hazards, into their operations and activities. And so you're aware, that publication had 10 individual elements that we also included in that recommendation for AB Specialty Silicone to address. Now let's talk about what they did to implement those recs. As we asked, they did develop that gas detection alarm program and procedures. They did establish an SMS using the CCPS publications, and they did incorporate the CCPS publication and those 10 elements into operations and activities. Now, one of the things I want to focus on was when you start building a safety management system and you also start including the 10 elements of managing chemical reactivity hazards, this is not a small undertaking. We went back several times, reviewed several of their documents, and then, I mean, this is the building of new policies and implementing them and getting follow-on documents and reports to prove that. So based on all the information provided in our communications with AB Specialty Silicones, the board voted to close this recommendation with closed acceptable action. The primary reason that we are recognizing these 3 recommendations is, keep in mind, these recommendations were issued in September of 2021. Recommendation number 2, we finished our communications and received everything we need in January of 2022. 4 months, 4 months. And then recommendation 1 and 3 were completed with all of our communications back and forth, and we received everything in March of 2022, which is 6 months. So they took on this gargantuan effort and completed all the recommendations for this investigation in 6 months. So again, good job to AB Specialty Silicones. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I want to take just a second to thank the board for allowing me to present information on these life-saving recommendations. And I will pass the floor back to Executive Director Kleist. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, for the presentation. The next presentation that staff is here to provide is a summary of the Loyalang Box Company investigation. The board recently adopted this report, and we're pleased to present the key findings, conclusions, and recommendations developed by the investigation staff. The investigator in charge, Drew Solly, will make the presentation this afternoon. Mr. Solly, please proceed.
Thank you, Executive Director Kleist. As Mr. Kleist just said, I'm Drew Solly. I served as the investigator in charge of the Loyalang Box Company investigation. I'll begin with an incident overview. The incident occurred in St. Louis, Missouri on April 3rd of 2017. The consequences of this incident were 4 fatalities, 1 to a Loyalang employee, and unfortunately 3 fatalities to the public at large. There was also severe property damage to the Loyalang facility, as well as to a company called Faultless Healthcare Linen, which is where the 3 public fatalities occurred. Next slide, please. I'll give a brief overview of the Loyalang steam system process flow. Water from the municipal water supply was first fed through a water softening system, and the water then flowed to a vessel called a makeup tank. The makeup tank was operated at atmospheric pressure, and in the makeup tank, water was heated with steam to drive off naturally occurring dissolved oxygen. The water was further treated chemically by the addition of sodium sulfite, which is called an oxygen scavenger. The purpose of the makeup tank was to ensure that the water fed to the rest of the steam system was free or nearly free of dissolved oxygen. From the makeup tank, water flowed into a pressure vessel called a semi-closed receiver, or SCR. From the SCR, water was pumped to 2 coil-type steam generators where the water was boiled into steam. The steam then flowed on to the corrugation process to provide the required heat to corrugate the paper. Eventually, the steam subsequently condensed and was returned back to the semi-closed receiver. Next slide, please. The semi-closed receiver is sort of the central figure in this incident. As I stated earlier, it was a pressure vessel. It was a vertically oriented cylindrical pressure vessel designed for a maximum allowable working pressure of 150 pounds. And of course, the purpose of the SCR was to receive the incoming makeup water and to receive the returning steam condensate. And then, of course, the other purpose of the SCR was to feed boiler feed water to the steam generators. The incident description is as follows. Loyalang only operated the steam generation system on weekday shifts, and the system was shut off for nights and weekends. On Friday, March 31st, 2017, operators noticed a leak coming from the bottom of the SCR. They contacted a local welding company to come and make an assessment of the vessel and make repair recommendations. But the company was not available to visit the Loyalang facility until the following Monday, April 3rd. The company continued operating the steam system on Friday, March 31st as normal, and they shut the system down Friday evening. Monday morning on April 3rd, the day of the incident, a Loyalang operator began their normal startup routine around 6 a.m. And about at 7:20 a.m., the semi-closed receiver pressure vessel exploded. And these are a few photos from the report. In the top left, you can see an image that was captured from a surveillance video across the street from the Loyalang facility. And up in the top left corner there, highlighted by the yellow circle, you can see the SCR, semi-closed receiver, as it was launched from the facility. So what happened is the bottom head of the pressure vessel catastrophically failed and came off of the rest of the vessel. And the pressurized water inside suddenly boiled, and that launched this pressure vessel from the Loyalang facility. The vessel traveled about 500 feet and crashed through the roof of a neighboring business, which you can see in the top right photo there, where the vessel came to rest. And in that building was where 3 members of the public were going about their normal duties and were fatally injured when the semi-closed receiver crashed through the roof. And then the bottom photo is a picture of the damage from inside the Loyalang facility. The investigation team identified the following 4 safety issues in the investigation: pressure vessel corrosion, pressure vessel inspection, pressure vessel repair, and process safety management systems. I will now cover the key findings for each of these safety issues. Of course, for the full details, seek out the full report. For pressure vessel corrosion, the SCR after the incident was found excessively thinned in the bottom head of the pressure vessel. The rest of the vessel, the shell and the upper head, were relatively unaffected by corrosion. The thinning was found to be caused by oxygen corrosion. There was both oxygen pitting corrosion and generalized thickness loss in the bottom head. Oxygen corrosion in steam systems results from dissolved oxygen in boiler feed water. Loyalang had chronic corrosion failures throughout its steam system, obviously resulting from the chronic presence of dissolved oxygen in its boiler feed water. The oxygen likely entered the Loyalang steam system during routine startup. Again, the system was operated cyclically, was started every morning, and was allowed to cool overnight. And that's the most likely route of oxygen intrusion, along with the naturally occurring oxygen that occurs in the municipal water supply. The investigation team found that Loyalang and its contractors did not adequately remove oxygen from the steam system water through the processes of de-aeration and chemical treatment. I'll move on to pressure vessel inspection. The in-service inspection of pressure vessels is a critical activity in the safe operation of a pressure vessel. The investigation team found that the semi-closed receiver had never been inspected while in service by any party. Loyalang had no in-house inspection program, and despite knowing about the corrosion from several corrosion failures both in the SCR and throughout the rest of the steam system, and multiple recommendations from Loyalang's contractors to perform an inspection on the SCR, the CSB found no evidence that Loyalang ever did. Additionally, the city of St. Louis was the jurisdictional authority relevant to the Loyalang facility. The city of St. Louis also never inspected the semi-closed receiver. And the semi-closed receiver was operated from about 1997 to when it failed in 2017. So this was a pressure vessel that operated for 20 years without ever being inspected while in service. The next safety issue is pressure vessel repair. In 2012, Loyalang discovered a leak, again, on the bottom head of the semi-closed receiver in the same location that they discovered the leak 3 days before the incident in 2017. Loyalang hired a company called Kickham Boiler and Engineering to repair the SCR. Now, Kickham Boiler and Engineering was what's known as a National Board R certificate holding company. In industry parlance, that's sometimes referred to as an R stamp. So this was certification from the National Board of Boiler and Pressure Vessel Inspectors that certified Kickham Boiler and Engineering to perform code-compliant pressure vessel repairs. Kickham Boiler and Engineering effected a repair to the bottom head of the SCR, and I'll cover a few of the details of their repair method on the next slide. But when they repaired the bottom head of the SCR in 2012, Kickham left unacceptably thin material in place. They did not remove all of the damaged material in the bottom head of the SCR. They only made a partial repair. The investigation team found that the repair did not conform to the National Board Repair Code, otherwise known as the National Board Inspection Code, or NBIC. And the relevant part of this is National Board Inspection Code Part 3. That's the portion that covers repairs and alterations to pressure retaining components. That material that Kickham left in place in 2012 continued corroding to failure in 2017. And during the National Board Pressure Vessel Repair repair process, there is meant to be the involvement of a person called a repair inspector who is also going to be certified by the National Board. Essentially, it's a layer of protection, a quality check in not so many words to ensure the compliance of the repair to National Board Code. There was a repair inspector involved with Kickham's 2012 repair to the Loyalang SCR, but the repair inspector did not detect the non-conforming repair and accepted the repair. Next slide, please. A few of the repair details are documented here. So Kickham cut, in 2012, Kickham Boiler and Engineering cut the lower head depicted in the picture there from the SCR shell. They cut the full lower head and the support skirt right at the lower shell to head weld. So they removed that whole lower head portion. They cut out approximately 24-inch diameter section of the center of the bottom head, shown in the upper right red highlighted rectangle there in the diagram. They removed that center portion of the bottom head and formed a repair patch and welded that repair patch in place. So what they ended up with was a portion of the bottom head shown in that red rectangle, and in the lower right of the diagram, there was a portion of steel original to the SCR bottom head that was not repaired. And that material was unacceptably thin at the time of the 2012 repair made by Kickham to the Loyalang SCR. However, Kickham elected to leave that material in place. And they re-welded, once they made the patch repair, they then re-welded the full lower head and skirt assembly back onto the SCR shell and placed the vessel back in operation. The next slide shows an image from the failed section of the bottom head. So this was taken after the incident. This is the portion of the SCR bottom head that fully separated from the SCR shell during the incident. And you can see the weld that was made between the repair patch and a small portion of what the report calls the reused ring. That's that portion of material that was left in place during the 2012 repair. And the top diagram illustrates that a little bit better too. So you can see in the top diagram, you can see the lower shell to head weld that fastens the lower head to the shell of the pressure vessel. You can see the portion of the head that Kickham repaired and the portion of the head that Kickham did not repair. And the entire fracture surface of the SCR bottom head was found to be contained in that, basically between those two welds, the lower shell to head weld and the repair patch to ring weld, as the report calls it. The final safety issue is process safety management systems. The CSB found that Loyalang had inadequate process safety management systems. Loyalang had no corrosion management program. They had no incident investigation program. As I stated earlier, there were multiple corrosion failures in the SCR, one in 2012 and a few others. Loyalang never performed an incident investigation to determine the underlying cause of those failures, which was oxygen corrosion. Loyalang had no mechanical integrity program or inspection programs. Loyalang never inspected the SCR while it was in service. And Loyalang had inadequate operating procedures and insufficient hazard awareness. So if and when you read the full report, you will see that the company had normalized corrosion failures in its steam system. And, you know, hazard awareness and sensitivity to danger are components of an effective process safety management system. And again, to summarize, the CSB found that Loyalang had inadequate process safety management systems. The report makes a total of 8 recommendations, 3 to Loyalang, centering around improving safety management systems at their operations. 3 are made to the city of St. Louis, focused on closing gaps in the city's regulation of pressure vessels. 1 is made to a company called Arise, which employed the authorized repair inspector during Kickham's 2012 repair. So that recommendation is centered on closing gaps in Arise's repair and alteration inspection process. And then the board makes 1 recommendation to the National Board of Boiler and Pressure Vessel Inspectors to essentially do the same thing as the board recommends to Arise, close gaps in the National Board repair and alteration inspection process to ensure that a authorized repair and unauthorized inspection company do not accept a non-conforming repair. And that concludes staff's presentation of the Loyalang investigation report.
Thank you, Mr. Solly. Before I proceed any further, I'd just like to check to see if either the board members wish to ask any questions of the investigator in charge.
Steve, no, I don't. It's Steve Owens. No, I don't have a question. I just want to make a comment. First, I want to thank Drew and the other people in the Office of Investigations that worked on this report. And as I said, it's been a long time coming. It took the agency far too long to get it done, but Drew helped get it over the finish line. And I also want to add that, just to be clear, that Drew has not been working on this report since 2017, that Drew, like many of our investigations, came in the middle of this process, had to take it over from other investigators who had left the agency, and because of the turnover that the CSB has experienced over the years, many of our reports are like that, where the initial investigations were conducted by investigators who are no longer with the agency, and new people like Drew who have come in have done yeoman's work in terms of picking up the reports, reviewing the file, and then putting together a really solid and very effective report, we believe, with regard to Loyalang, and that will be the case with other reports going forward as well. So Drew, we want to thank you and everyone else who worked on this report for your efforts in this regard.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. This report was important in a number of ways, not just as a result of the 4 fatalities that occurred as a result of this incident, and we like to express our condolences to the families of the 4 individuals for your loss as a result of what happened in St. Louis that day. But this is an issue that is all too common in the industry, where we find the maintenance and the maintenance activities and the overall maintaining of the structural integrity of any system identifies operational issues that lead to the outcome that we are talking about here today. This is a case where corrosion led to a repair that was not properly inspected, or in this case validated, that ultimately failed, and we had this catastrophic outcome. Pressure vessels such as the one that we talked about today are found in a number of areas throughout the United States. They're used in operations ranging from providing heat to one's residential home, or to a multi-family residential structure, to larger scale pressure vessels that are used in a variety of manufacturing and production operations. But the real message here is that we hope that this report is read by any operation, any organization that does in fact operate a pressure vessel to determine if they too have similar vulnerabilities with regard to corrosion or the absence of a safety management system or a system to maintain the structural integrity of their pressure vessel. We do encourage everyone who would have the need to operate these types of vessels to read this report and adapt our recommendations as they apply to your operation. But again, this is a very important message we want to share, not just with Loyalang and the city of St. Louis, but any organization throughout the United States that operates similar types of units. As Steve Owens cited earlier, this report happened in 2017. A number of people have been involved in this investigation from the initial deployment to the point where Drew has successfully brought this to its conclusion. And I too wish to thank Drew for his outstanding investigation work in bringing this to a successful closure. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the names of some other former CSB employees that played an important role in this investigation from deployment to the point where Drew was able to assume responsibilities for this investigation as the investigator in charge. I'd like to thank Mary Beth Mulcahy, Cheryl McKenzie, Jonathan Whitwell, and Steve Cutchin, all former investigators with the agency that has provided support to bring us to the point where we're at today. So I thank them all for that. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Mr. Owens. And again, we appreciate the board's feedback on our draft report. And we also wish to extend our appreciation for adopting the report in a very timely fashion, again, to share this very important safety message with the industry. So Mr. Owens, I turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Steve. And again, I want to reiterate what Steve said, to thank everyone who had been involved with this investigation and in the preparation of this report over the years. I also want to thank other staff. I won't get into any of the names because there's too many to mention, but in the various other offices, including our office of the General Counsel and some of the folks in our administrative office as well, who play a big role in making sure that we can all do our jobs as we're required to do by law, and we can produce these reports in the way that we're able to do so. So I want to thank all of them as well. Also just want to mention, as Steve alluded, and as Drew said also, this report will be publicly available. I'm not sure if it's up on the website yet, but if not, it will be up there relatively soon. So if you have the opportunity and you're interested, please take a look at the report. Sylvia, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that before we move on.
Well, I just wanted to echo the sentiments around thanking Drew and the entire Chemical Safety Board staff who participated in getting this report out the door. Again, we have a hardworking staff and team of folks at the CSB that are highly capable, and this is but one example of that. And I'm looking forward to this being a continuation of what we see in the future in the way of reports.
Great, and thank you, Sylvia. And now we would like to proceed to our public comment portion of this meeting. As I had mentioned at the outset, we're asking that everyone please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and the little icon on your computer screen where there's the ability to raise your hand, to please do that so we can recognize you and make sure that you get a chance to speak. If for some reason you don't get an opportunity to speak, we'll go to the top of the hour here and try to get as many people in the queue as we can. But if you don't get an opportunity to speak, or if you have more to say than you can say in 3 minutes, please send us your comments by email. The email address is public, P-U-B-L-I-C, at csb.gov, and we'll have an opportunity to review those as well. So I'll turn it back to Brian to handle the mechanics of our comments. So, Brian.
Certainly, if anyone would like to have an opportunity to have the floor, leave comments, please use the raise hand option. I'll announce your name. I'll ask you to unmute. Please unmute, and the floor will be yours. If anyone, again, would like to leave a comment or make a comment, we'll look for the raise your hand icon. Please hit the raise your hand icon. We'll certainly give you permission to have the floor.
Got any takers, Brian?
Steve, at this time, I haven't seen any hands raised yet.
Well, we'll do going once, going twice. Nope, there's one.
We've got one that came up here.
I will say at the beginning also that I forgot to mention this, that we're not in a position to really be able to respond to comments or questions on this, but if, as I said, if there's something that you would like us to respond to, please send us an email and we'll take a look at it and see how we can proceed with that. So thank you.
Jeff Johnson, I believe you have the floor and you should have the capability to speak.
Well, can you hear me properly?
Jeff, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm just curious on the Loyalang thing, report. I thought that's pretty interesting. Why was the company Kickham not mentioned in terms of, I guess their welding sort of led to the problem? That's one question. And of course, I think everybody on the panel, everybody in the audience here would like to know what your plans are over the next, say, 6 months to 12 months in the more immediate future in terms of hiring investigators and so forth. Do you have any goals you could share with us? I'll let it go at that.
Well, I'm going to violate my own rule here real quick. Just with regard to the first question. On the second one, Jeff, maybe we can have a follow-up discussion on this. I know we owe you a conversation anyway, and so we appreciate your comments. But just for the benefit of the folks on the call today with regard to Kickham, the reason there are no recommendations to Kickham is that they are no longer in business, and that is a standing practice of the agency not to make recommendations to entities that are no longer in business. So that's the answer to that one. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Norman Rogers put a request in to unmute. You should have the floor, assuming audio is working for you.
Very good, thank you. I was just curious, generally speaking, how was Loyalang management as far as participation went and not having an inspection program in place?
Well, I'll do it again. Sorry about this. Yeah, Norman, I think if you read the report, you'll get a good flavor for what that is. I don't really want to get into the details in terms of answering questions, and I hope you'll appreciate that. That's a very important question you raised. But if when the report's posted, take a look at it, and if you've got questions about it afterwards, reach out to us, and we'll be happy to address those. So thank you.
I think we've got someone else on deck, David Miller. Again, this opportunity is to leave a comment, not necessarily a question and answering phase. David Miller, I've asked you to unmute. Assuming audio is working, you should have the capability to leave a comment.
Thank you. I have unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, David.
Excellent, excellent. Well, first off, congratulations on the nomination, Mr. Owens, and of course, congratulations, Ms. Johnson, on your appointment. My question has to do with the expected timeline for some of the upcoming reports. Previously, there had been something posted on the website that had just some general dates, and I just wanted to ask if for the upcoming reports, especially for the ones we're interested in, and I'm with the American Petroleum Institute, so that would be especially PES and Kiera and a few of the others, will you be providing additional information on the expected times for the releases of those reports?
Let me just say this very quickly on that. First of all, David, as was said earlier in this meeting, this meeting rather, we very much appreciate the collaboration and the relationship we have with the API and the work that the APA has done in terms of implementing recommendations that the board has put forth, not only in, as was discussed today by Chuck Barbie, but previously as well. So we want to thank you for that. Also, with regard to your second point, Steve Price mentioned some of that, but the timeline should be available on the website. We'll double check. If not, we'll make sure that it is, but we certainly will be providing updates to the extent possible hereafter on the status of reports and adjusting the timeline as we need to based on the progress we're making. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate working with your board, and certainly with the investigators. Not so much more so, I think, with Chuck's team, of course, on recommendations. So
yes,
appreciate having another one closed out today. It was good work, and I would like to thank him for acknowledging that when we stand up a document from scratch, it is a bit more of an undertaking. So that was very nice to hear that, and well appreciated as well. So again, thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Well, thank you.
Steve, we currently don't have anyone on deck. We can get this done in a moment or two if you'd like.
Sure, you may have worn them out already. So. Well, Brian, if we don't have, it looked like you were going to say something, but if we don't have anyone else in the queue, I think we can wrap it up. And then, as I mentioned, if folks have comments that you think of after this meeting or something that you see in the Loyalang report or recommendations or anything else, feel free to send us an email at the address I mentioned, which is public@csb.gov. We will have another meeting like this in the fall. We're required under our regulations to have a public meeting at least once every quarter. I think I can speak for Member Johnson as well in saying that we hope to have them a bit more frequently than that as we go forward and as we're beginning to review reports and take other actions that we believe that the public needs to be made aware of. So I want to thank you all again for your participation today. Thank you for the support you've given to the CSB and the work it's done over the years. And we look forward to working with all of you going forward. Sylvia, before we wrap it up, do you have any last comments?
No, other than thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to having future meetings and having you involved. But thank you for your support.
All righty. And with that, we'll say goodbye and look forward to seeing you at the next one of these meetings. Thanks so much.